So welcome back. We are now joined by your Vice President Welfare candidates. I'm going to let them introduce yourselves. Christina, if you could start.
Hi, my name's Christina.
Hello, David. All right.
Hi, I'm George Seabrook.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, your first question, are you all ready?
No?
Yeah,
No,
born ready.
excellent.
Born ready.
Lovely. Right. What do you think constitutes an ideal welfare candidate?
Do you want me to go first? Okay. I think in the name itself, it kind of suggests someone who cares about the well-being of other students. And I think that kind of embraces the idea of SUSU enriching the lives of students. So someone who is able to support students and who cares about their well-being.
Yeah, I think it's firstly about passion and about caring for students. I don't think you could be VP Welfare if you didn't genuinely care about the welfare of students, so I'd agree with you on that point. But I also think that to be an ideal candidate, you also have to have experience and you have to have really detailed, specific policies. You don't want to just sort of say, we'll do more of this and we'll be better at that. You need to get really specific.
David, I'm going to cut you off there.
Oh, sure,
Sorry.
yeah,
George,
that's
can you answer that for me, please?
I'd just like to say Dave's throwing some incredible shade at us right now. I think the ideal welfare candidate is probably, obviously passionate about caring for people. Empathy is like the root of all human connection, and it's important to have that inherent in a candidate. If you're not empathetic, how can you do the job that is like basically got empathy synonymous in its title? But you need to be detail-oriented. You need to have the ability to stay on top of things, because it is one of the only two other VP roles to deal with two zones as well. So you've got a lot on your plate, and you need to be good at delegating as well, and you need to know what to limit yourself to.
Sorry, George, I'm going to cut you off there. Thank you very much. Your next question. What is your opinion on the support systems SUSU currently has in place for students? David, if you're all right to start there.
Oh, that's a really fantastic question. I think that we have a lot of really good support at the moment, but I think that it's really the way that we get that out to students that's the problem. We have a really, really fantastic advice department, the advice centre, where you can get help with your housing, and you can go with any problem and they will help you. They will sit down with you, they'll go over contracts, they'll talk about your mental health issues or whatever. But we struggle to get out there and to get that across to people. So I think that would be kind of my point there. I think that we need to take the existing structures we've got that are really good and then get them out to students.
Okay, brilliant. George?
I think that things like the Advice Centre, SUSU Elections, which is a really good support system for people who need improvement, need help finding housing, and the Advice Centre, of course, also helps with housing advice, things like SU Recruit for employability and jobs. We've got loads of really good services out to students. So a lot of students know a lot about SU Recruit and SUSU Elections with really high registration rates, but I think, we need to promote these services better, and I think that... Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. What is your opinion on the support systems SUSU currently has in place for students?
Oh, well, I think, just for a specific example, I think the Advice Centre is a really good one, but I think it needs to be improved with more advisors available, or better hours, or a better system of registration for an appointment, because you could go in, need an appointment as soon as possible, and be delayed for one by 8 days, sometimes in really busy seasons. I know I was, so...
Okay, thank you. And Christina?
I think we have the cornerstones in place for what we need, because the Advice Centre is such a great facility that's available to students. And this year we've got over 20 peer support students who've been trained to be able to help specific faculties. So I think that's fantastic. Like David said, I think they're all in place. I think it's how we communicate them to students so that they know they're available and where they can go to get them readily.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, fantastic. Right, George, I'm going to come to you now. As you may well be aware, the Stress Less Fest has come under scrutiny following criticisms of the petting zoo. What are your thoughts on the issues raised?
The issues regarding the petting zoo?
Yes.
Okay, well, firstly, they're wrong. The issues raised in the West 16 article were relatively good issues to raise. There's no denying we need to be concerned with animal welfare and student welfare as well. But I think it overlooked the massive fact that the people who organised this, SUSU and the company liaising with, were professionals. What we did, and that the animals were bred and used to human contact. And I think as our current VP Welfare, Sam Bailey, brilliantly said to me...
Sorry, George, I'm going to cut you off there. Christina, if you could weigh in.
Firstly, I'd like to say I like how this year we changed it from Stressless Fest to You Are More Than. I think that was a fantastic thing to do because I think it highlights that you're not just there for your degree. University is a bigger aspect than that. With regards to the petting zoo, I think the company assured SUSU, and I think they assured us about the welfare of animals being looked after. So I think people are always going to have an opinion and you're always going to have that 50-50 divide. But I think by opening up to student consultation, that's probably the best way to go about it.
Okay, David.
I kind of take it from a slightly different perspective. I think that the petting zoo is absolutely fine, but I also think it's a little bit irrelevant because student welfare really is about supporting students throughout the whole year. So if we have soft chairs and soft music, and we have a little petting zoo one day, and we sort of tell people to take a day out for themselves, that's all well and good. But actually, I think that well-being is really about supporting students 24/7 for the whole year. So I've got no problems with the petting zoo, but I actually think that that's not what's going to make the biggest impact on students. It's sort of a bit of a gimmick, really. It's a nice gimmick, but we need to make sure that we're actually dealing with issues.
I'd like to... Can I cut in on that?
Sorry, George, I'm not going to let you cut in there, I'm afraid.
Shame.
So we're going to talk a little bit now. I think, Christina, you mentioned student consultation. So I'm going to ask you if you could quickly sum up how you'd go about that.
I think this year the Tap Choose change has been a really good way, a quick and effective way of students being able to weigh in on what their opinions are, and it gives students the options of A, B and C, and then they can pick, and I think that's a good way of doing things. So,
okay. David, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think SUSU has become a bit of an echo chamber. We've got these student leaders and these SABs all talking to each other, and that's kind of it. So I think that the idea of opening up to more students by making it more accountable is great. I love the fact that the zones are going to have a lot more sort of randomly selected students on them, because that means that you don't just have sort of the really super keen, cliquey people who sort of get fully involved. You've got just normal students coming in, giving their opinions. That's got to be a good thing.
Brilliant, thank you. And George?
Can you repeat the question, please?
How would you use sort of student consultation?
Consultation with what?
With students, George, like asking them their opinions
Those
on
that take
welfare
degrees.
matters.
I don't know. You've stumped me on this because I think it's kind of an obvious question and answer. I think you want to ask students what they think of the services that are being provided, what they think of the union itself, and you want to respond in the most pragmatic and realistic way, but also actually no, not the most pragmatic and realistic way. You want to promote change. You want to make things more daring. You want to do things that are riskier. So even if it's not pragmatic to even if you're going to respond to student consultation and they want something a little bit more done that you might not be as feasible, I think it's important that we try.
Okay, fabulous. Your next question, and David, I'm going to come to you first with this.
Yeah, sure.
Do you think the Don't Rush campaign that SUSU runs has been effective?
That's a good question. I think it's been effective in that it says the right message, that you shouldn't be rushed into making a contract decision before Christmas because you need to get to know people, you need to settle in. And quite frankly, the idea that there aren't enough houses is ridiculous. There are. One policy that I'm putting forward is that I think that we often try and put in sort of the Don't Rush campaign midway through a term when people can't really hear it. So what I'm proposing is that we actually produce a separate Your Guide to First Year for all students, separate to freshers material, and they can keep that for the whole year, and we would include Don't Rush as part of that, along with welfare, budgeting, all sort of the things that you need to get involved in SUSU life.
Okay, thank you, David. Christina?
I think the numbers speak for itself. A lot of students, I think last year we had less students sign up for houses because of the Don't Rush campaign, so I think it's a great thing. I think the issue is that it's not targeting all types of students. The students that wait and do their contracts are students who maybe don't have the same availabilities or the same requirements academically as other students. So being a healthcare student, we are encouraged to rush and pay for our houses because of placement. So I think it's about targeting the Don't Rush campaign for all types of students.
So why do you think so many students are still rushing? What do you think the
I
reasons
think,
for that are?
Like David said, there is this idea that there aren't enough houses, that the best ones are going to go, the ones closest to campus, the cheapest ones are going to go. Yeah. And I think it's about moving the Don't Rush campaign to the beginning of spring semester.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Sorry, I'm just going to stop you there. George?
All right, I think the Don't Rush to Rent campaign is really good. I think there's some good stuff that's been implemented. I know there was an idea to have a dropping housing thing on the concourse in Housing Week last week or the week before, which was a good idea, but mostly directed them straight to the Advice Centre. I think that Don't Rush is a message that's mostly applicable to Southampton, doesn't apply to students in Winchester, where the housing market is very different. And I think that whilst a guide to first year overall is actually a really good idea.
Thank you.
For housing, we're all about love here. For housing, it affects so many different people at different years, different ages, different stages. It's not a catch-all for first year who are all looking for a house, who need this advice on dealing with contracts and landlords. You need second year students who might be burned by experience, and third year students who want to live closer or might want to give their advice on something. You need to rethink how we structure housing advice.
Okay, thank you very much, George. Right, we're now going to move on to, do you think enough is being done to support diversity and equality within our Students' Union? David, I'm going to come to you first.
That's a really fantastic question. I think that there have been a lot of really, really great changes. I mean, we have, a lot of really great minority groups that now get to express themselves a lot more. We've got Black History Month, LGBT. We've got the new Welcome to Our World International Festival, which is, I think, a really, really good step in the right direction. But I think that one thing we need to do at SUSU is try and actually broaden our understanding of what diversity means. So I think, for myself, that true diversity is about saying that we at this Students' Union aren't going to get really political, we aren't going to get really backbitey about each other, but there is enough space in this union for people of different views, and I, as your VP Welfare, will 100% support the right of people that I disagree with to speak their own opinions and have true diversity, because I think that if we allow everyone to speak, then we get an exchange of ideas and a more open culture, and again, I think that's what diversity is really about.
Brilliant, thank you, David. And Christina?
I think this year's seen a lot of diversity in that we've had so many events, like David mentioned, Black History Month, and being involved with putting on subtitled screenings has been something that I've been really proud of.
Definitely.
And I think little things and little steps like that are great, but I think it's about trying to do more to make sure that we do encourage all students and that we do include them in all that SUSU stands for. So I think single loos that are now for both genders, that's another way that we've moved to be more equal, and so I think it's just working on those little things to make bigger steps.
Okay, and George?
Going back to probably the most overused buzzword of the last debate, collaboration, the Edge recently put on an international issue with a really colourful, really eye-catching cover with loads of great information about international media, with TV, music, and it's a really interesting read written by students who are passionate about other cultures, and that's a really good thing we did for diversity, a bit of collaboration, a bit of exploration that was put on by SUSU. But one thing I noted from talking to fellow students is that they sometimes don't really understand what SUSU does to celebrate diversity, even though we had the Black History Month events, we had the screening of Selma and other things at the beginning of the year, of the academic year, and people don't see those as being SUSU things, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but it's also odd that there's this big disconnect that people will see the African and Caribbean society at working with union films and see that is a diverse thing to be done for Black History Month, and we're celebrating that, but don't associate it with SUSU.
Okay, thank you very much, George. So, David, I'm going to come to you with this next question.
Sure.
What have you liked and disliked about other VP welfare policies over the past few years?
Okay, that's very controversial because we've got the ex-welfare in the room. So let's start with the positives.
It's not ex yet.
That's very good. That's true. So what do I like? I really, really liked something we had a couple of years ago where we had our own green label for sustainable products, ethical purchasing. That was something that a couple of welfares ago started. That has sadly now died out. So I would really like to sort of revive that green label, ethical purchasing, fair trade, good egg, red tractor, kind of all that stuff like that. I think that'd be really, really good. Things that I don't like about what's happening. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think we often focus very much on things in the short term, and I think we need to start developing projects that will develop student welfare in the long run. For example, on housing, on mental health, I think we need to focus on culture change and things that will last longer than one SAB is actually elected for, because we want to have our little moment where we've achieved something in the year. And actually, I think that it's about more than that. You need to say, I might not be the one who finishes this, but I'm going to start it and send it in the right direction, and like take the ego out of it, I think. And I think that will be a really positive thing.
Okay, brilliant. So you say that obviously it'll be short term, you can start those policy changes, but how will you guarantee they're sort of kept up by your successors if you're elected?
Well, I think it's about promoting things where once you've got the ball rolling, it will naturally snowball. The big policy that I'm talking about today is housing. I want to partner with like a TripAdvisor style review website called Movem, who produce detailed reviews of student housing. Now, if we start partnering with them, do like housing fairs and stuff, then we can get really detailed, specific information so students don't have to guess whether they've got a good house. They're going to know whether it had mold. They're going to know whether the landlord is a really good landlord or not. But as they get more and more data over the years, then the information for students is going to increase. So do you see, like, we start it now, but then in a few years' time, it's even better than it is at this point?
Do you not think it's a bit ambitious to expect future VP welfares are going to sort of carry on this on? Don't worry, David, I'm going to come to Christina for that question.
That's fine.
I think, to be fair, someone who's going to run for the role is going to share the core values.
Yeah.
So in theory, David's right. Someone who's so when you hand over, you're hoping that the person who's taking over from you shares the same core values. So in theory, if you have something that you put in place that naturally should progress itself, hopefully you would hope the person that you're handing over to shares those same values and will carry them forward to make them better.
And George, can I ask your thoughts on what's been said so far?
Yeah, okay, so at the end of Becky Thomas's, who was the VP welfare before, Sam Bailey, who she implemented, part of her policy was to implement a housing guide to be produced for freshers to be included in all the fresher packs and be available in all the flats, in all the halls. And that was scrapped pretty quickly, not because it's a terrible idea to provide freshers with housing, but because under the named VP Welfare Now opinion, that it was anytime you put housing information into a brochure, it immediately became irrelevant once you published it, which that's part of the problem. It's not a bad thing to have different opinions coming onto this, but it's this, but it's the nature of the beast that you have these different people coming to the job every year, in theory, and they will always come with a different set of ideas about how these things work. I personally think there's been some really good stuff done, not just in the welfare department this year, to change SUSU, like the brand review, like the expansion of Don't Rush to Rate, like Rent, like the start of the It's Time to Talk mental health campaign, things like that are really good. They just need not changing completely, because the more you change it, we're seen as inconsistent. You need to keep them up and just strengthen them, expand them, and make them more impactful.
Okay, brilliant. David, what do you think about George's response there?
I think it's true. It's a bit vague, but I think it's true. I don't know. I don't want to get negative, so I'd rather just
Okay, Christina, what about you? What do you think of George's response there?
I think George has a valid point. Whenever you hand over to someone or someone else takes on, everyone's going to have a different idea or a different take on things, and that's not a bad thing. I think what all three of us mean is that at the end of the day, there's always going to be a core value. As with SUSU, with any brand, you're going to have a core value that you stand for. With a role like VP Welfare, you would hope that everyone who takes on that role has that same core value. So it wouldn't matter who took on the next, as in the role, they would still have that underlying value, if you see what I mean.
So what you're saying there is it doesn't matter who is elected to VP Welfare, because they all share the same core values there, Christina?
Not necessarily, because during your year, different people go about things differently. People will focus on different things, and people will have different policies or different aspects that they'll focus on. So not necessarily. What I mean to say is at the core of at the heart of things, people are going to have the same core values. So I'd like to hope that whether I was elected or these two were elected, they would still want to care about students and their welfare at the heart of things.
Okay, so George, do you think that all VP Welfare candidates share the same core values, or do you think that's kind of tarring them all the same brush, overlooking what they've achieved?
I don't want to go into the achievements part because I'm afraid someone will pull the rug out from under me. But Mainly, I think we do share a lot of the same core values. I know David and I are very passionate about mental health, and David especially has got very key plans about housing. I know it's something I'm very interested in and interested in housing. It's an important thing that really needs to be focused on. But yeah, we're both really passionate about mental health issues. I mean, Christina, I think you've clearly got very subject-specific views about the issues that affect healthcare students as well, inside your own ideas. I mean, your manifesto's got like a EKG as the design, which is awesome. So we do share a lot of core values. I think we just have different sort of laser focuses on different areas.
And David, can I get your take on this?
Yeah, I basically agree with the other two. I think that we do share the same passion for people and the same compassion for people. I absolutely agree with George. I think mental health is something that whoever got elected, it would be something that came to the forefront. I think mental health, it's time for that to change. I'd say the one thing that you asked, like, well, would it matter who was elected? I'd say that the one thing that I think I've done, if you look at my manifesto that the other two haven't yet, is I've moved beyond the level of talking about ideas and feelings and, better and bigger and bolder and stronger. And I've actually got a list of very specific, detailed ideas. And I think that's what sets me apart, that I've kind of moved beyond the idea and done the research and got the specific policy as to how we're going to achieve it, not just what we want to achieve.
Okay, brilliant. So we're going to move on from that question now. So do you think that students have enough influence on this zone, or do you think it's more staff-led with things like SU Recruit and the lettings agency and things like that? So Christina, can I come to you first?
I think it's interesting that you've picked something that's relatively new with SU Recruit because it's only been around for a year. So I think at this moment in time, a lot of students do feel that it's very much staff-led, but there's room to make it more student-led and student-friendly, something where students feel that they can approach it better and it's more accessible. So I think, yes, at this moment in time, it might feel like it, but I definitely think there's room to make it more student-led.
And how would you go about that?
I think we're already kind of paving the way for it with student staff members working at SU Recruit and the lettings, SUSU Lettings. I think it's about making students aware, that they can approach it and how best to access it and when to access it.
Okay, brilliant. George, I'm coming to you. Same question.
I'm really sorry, can you repeat it?
Have you forgotten the question again?
I'm really sorry.
Do you think that students have enough influence on this zone, or do you think it's more staff-led with things like the Advice Centre, with SU Recruit, with the Lettings Agency?
I think it's a partnership. I think you've got the committees beneath in sustainability zone led by student officers, the housing officer, the wellbeing officer, the ethics and environment officer, equality and diversity officer. In a sustainability zone alone, you've got a Nightline officer and all volunteers who work for Nightline and with student minds and peer support. Those elements are very student run and they're designed to be that way. But you have staff support. I mean, you have staff support in every area, but I think with welfare, because a lot of it is not touch and go, but with the Advice Centre, you go to the Advice Centre, you talk to an adult advisor who knows what they're talking about and who's going to give you direct advice. That's what makes welfare seem a little bit more adult-led, I think, than some of the other zones. But I think it's a partnership.
So what do you think there, Christina, about it being adult-led? What do you think on George's response?
I think what George means is before the peer supporters that kind of role came about, it was if you wanted advice from the Advice Centre, you'd have a trained clinician who would help you out. So till we had specific students trained up to do that job for each of the faculties, you didn't kind of have a student representative for the degrees, which I agree with. But now that we have that, I think you do kind of have a split. So for specific advice, you would go to someone at the Advice Centre. But if it was course related, you do have that kind of support. As with committees, they have welfare officers within committees for student groups.
Okay, brilliant. And David, you've listened to these two talk. What's your take on this?
Well, I think that, first, students are adults, first of all.
Damn it!
Just about. I would say that I think the best way we can involve students is by helping students with their own initiatives. So employability is a really big area within the zone. And I think there are some really specific things we could do that would actually allow students to feel much more connected to what we're doing. We could get Winchester School of Art students displaying their art on campus. We could get members, student musicians, as part of every lineup for gigs. We could get pop-up shops so students can sell their wares and have student-led initiatives, business experience. And just generally speaking, we can do things where students are coming to us with their ideas and saying, you know, this is what we want to do, give us some funding, and let's do it, kind of thing. And so, I think that, obviously we're going to have staff sort of facilitating that, but if we're kind of saying, come on, students, come with your ideas, then we're on to a winner. That's going to be great.
Okay, so our last question now, and David, I'm going to come to you first for this one.
Yeah.
Candidates have mentioned the importance of mutual respect between students and peer-led support.
Yeah.
How would you personally cultivate this if you're elected?
Mutual respect and...
Mutual respect between students and peer-led support.
That's a good question. Well, I think respect comes from being credible. So I think that the culture we need to be promoting is one where people can be sort of very open and honest. If we're talking about peer support, then we're talking about very personal issues, mental health, etc. I think that to be credible, we need to kind of get to the point where talking about your issues and talking about your problems is incredibly normalised. It shouldn't be something that you even, it shouldn't be remarkable. Students struggle at uni, that's fine. 1 in 5 have mental health problems. That's normal, that's fine. I've struggled with depression and anxiety throughout university, but I'm here and I'm running, and that should be absolutely normal, it's fine.
Thank you very much, David. George?
Crap. Can you repeat the question, please?
Candidates have mentioned the importance of mutual respect between students and peer-led support. How would you cultivate this?
I don't know. I would listen to what students want to change. I'd listen to the officers beneath me in the different zones. I think it's important to have... It's important to admit when you're wrong, right? It's important to admit when you don't have all the answers. I just have questions and want to change these things. I think... So I don't personally know,
Okay, thank
but
you,
I bet
George.
there are people who do.
Okay, well, let's see if Christina does.
I think, like David mentioned, credibility is one good way of making sure that there's mutual respect. But I also think transparency is a good one. And I know that word's thrown around a lot and people are like, But I think being open and transparent, there's often a stigma with certain sensitive topics, shall I call them for now. But I think by removing that stigma, I think that leads to a lot more openness and transparency. So I think that's the way to go about it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. So those are your candidates for Vice President Welfare, David, George and Christina. Thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
That brings our debates to an end. So don't forget you can tune in tomorrow for the next 3 zones. So that is VP Student Communities, VP Engagement, and the one we're all waiting for, your next union president. So thank you very much for joining me tonight, and don't forget to tune in again tomorrow. And we also have a Q&A session on the 1st of March. Thank you again, and good night.